When I first built my dream mansion high on Eagle Crest Mountain, I thought nothing could touch me. The view stretched for miles, the air smelled of pine and freedom, and my land was paid for in full. But one morning, I woke to a sound that split the mountain air like thunderbolt. The local HOA, a group of power-hungry neighbors who claimed I owed fees, had arrived with machines and smug smiles. Before I could stop them, they crushed my gates, tore through my driveway, and began ripping apart the house I had built with my own hands. Their excuse? A stack of fraudulent unpaid dues? My outrage turned to cold, calculating fury. They believed they owned my mountain. They believed they could steal my life's work. They were wrong. I had power they didn't know existed, and I would use it to wipe their entire district off the state map. Asterisk. The first time I laid eyes on Eagle Crest Mountain, I knew I had found the place I would spend the rest of my life. The road that led to the top was steep and unforgiving, twisting through dense pine forests and sheer rock faces, but the view at the summit erased every ounce of effort it took to reach it. From my future doorstep, I could see miles of rolling valleys, endless green ridges fading into blue horizons, and a sky so wide it felt like it belonged to another world. It was raw, untamed, and absolutely perfect. After years of city noise, constant deadlines, and neighbors who lived practically on top of me, the mountain promised a kind of peace I had almost forgotten existed. I signed the purchase papers the same week I first visited, barely negotiating the price. Some things I believed were worth paying for in full. The land came with challenges. The nearest grocery store was 20 miles away, and winter storms could bury the roads for days at a time. The soil was rocky and stubborn, more suited to wildflowers than gardens. But these were the very reasons no one else had built here, and why the price had remained surprisingly reasonable. For me, every obstacle was a blessing in disguise, a barrier that kept the chaos of the outside world at bay. Over the next year, I poured my savings, energy, and heart into building my dream mountain mansion that would blend luxury with rugged beauty. I worked with local craftsmen who knew the land's moods and could coax strength from the stone and timber. Together we raised a house of thick beams and panoramic windows, anchored deep into the bedrock. The finished home was everything I had imagined. A long, sweeping balcony wrapped around the second floor, offering a full 360-degree view of the surrounding wilderness. Inside, the great room rose 2 stories high, with a stone fireplace large enough to burn whole logs. Every piece of furniture was carefully chosen to feel warm, but not ostentatious soft leather chairs. Hand-woven rugs, tables carved from reclaimed wood. At night, when the stars spilled across the black sky and the wind whispered through the pines, I felt like the only person left on earth. It was a feeling of freedom I had never known before. No traffic, no noise, no rules. Just me and the mountain. For a while, life was as close to perfect as I could imagine. My days settled into a peaceful rhythm. I woke early to the sound of birdsong and brewed coffee in silence, watching sunlight creep across the valley below. Afternoons were spent hiking the nearby trails or tending to small projects around the house. Occasionally, a hiker or hunter might pass by on the lower roads, but they were rare and respectful. I paid my property taxes on time, kept my permits in order, and lived as quietly as the forest itself. I believed naively as it turned out that isolation protected me from human greed. The first letter arrived in early spring, tucked neatly into my mailbox at the base of the mountain road. It looked official enough. A plain white envelope, the return address marked Eagle Crest Homeowners Association. Inside, a single sheet of paper informed me that my property was subject to the Eagle Crest Community Maintenance fee, an annual payment of $2,500 to cover road upkeep, snow removal, and shared amenities. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. My deed clearly stated that my land was private, outside the subdivision boundaries. There were no shared amenities. My road was carved into my own property, maintained at my own expense. I smiled at the absurdity and set the letter aside, assuming it was some kind of automated mailing. A month later, another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. It claimed that I had failed to pay the required annual fee and now owed late penalties. It warned of possible legal action if the debt was not settled within 30 days. I frowned, irritation replacing amusement. Maybe a new HOA president was trying to flex authority beyond the subdivision. I called the number listed on the letter, expecting a quick resolution. A woman with a clipped, icy voice answered. She introduced herself as the association's secretary and insisted that my property benefited from community services and was therefore obligated to pay. When I explained that my deed exempted me from any such obligation, she chuckled softly, a sound that felt more like a warning than amusement, and said, "Everyone benefits from Eagle Crest, whether they admit it or not." Then she hung up. I didn't like the tone of that call, but I still wasn't worried. I gathered my documents, deeds, permits, county maps, and drove to the local property office the next day. The clerk on duty, an older man named Harris, flipped through my papers and nodded in agreement. "You're in the clear," he said. "That HOA doesn't have a single inch of jurisdiction over your land. If they keep bothering you, file a harassment complaint." His calm confidence reassured me. I left with a stamped copy of the county map and the feeling that the matter was settled. Summer passed, in peace. I almost forgot about the letters until a third one arrived in late August. This one was thick, stuffed with itemized penalties and new maintenance assessments, bringing the supposed total to over $7,000. The language was sharper now, threatening liens and property seizures. I felt a flash of anger. These people were not just overstepping, they were attempting outright extortion. I drove down to the subdivision to confront someone face to face. The Eagle Crest community was a cluster of oversized homes, arranged around a private lake a few miles down the mountain. It looked exactly like the kind of place I had escaped. Perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, and neighbors who measured status by the length of their driveways. I parked near the HOA office, a tidy building that resembled a small courthouse. Inside, a receptionist eyed me warily as I explained my situation. After a long wait, a man emerged from a side door. He was tall, tanned, and dressed in an expensive blazer despite the summer heat. He introduced himself as Royce, the HOA president. Royce listened as I explained that my property was private and exempt from their fees. He smiled politely, but his eyes were hard, like polished stone. "We believe all properties in the Eagle Crest region share in the community's infrastructure," he said smoothly. "Your road connects to ours. Your property benefits from our snowplows, our emergency services, our presence. It's only fair you contribute." I told him that my road was privately maintained and that I'd never used a single service paid for by their fees. I even showed him the stamped county map, proving I was outside their boundary. His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maps can change," he said softly. "Communities evolve. You wouldn't want to be the one neighbor refusing to participate, would you? It creates tension." The way he said tension sent a chill down my spine. I left before the conversation could turn uglier, but his words lingered like a shadow. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease. These weren't just petty neighbors with too much free time. There was something more calculated, more dangerous. In the way Royce had looked at me, I reinforced my gates, installed new security cameras, and tried to shake off the encounter. Weeks passed without further letters, and I began to hope that maybe they had finally backed down. But the mountain was too quiet. At night, I sometimes thought I heard the distant hum of engines on the lower roads. I'd step onto my balcony and stare into the darkness, but the forest revealed nothing. Then, one early morning in late autumn, I woke to a sound that didn't belong to the wilderness. It wasn't the call of an owl or the whisper of wind through the pines. It was a deep, mechanical growl, steady and menacing, echoing up the mountainside. I threw on a jacket and stepped outside. Below, far down the road, a string of headlights flickered through the trees, large vehicles moving in formation, climbing steadily toward my home. Bulldozers, trucks, a convoy. My stomach tightened. The Eagle Crest HOA had decided to make their next move, and they weren't coming to talk. In that moment, standing on my own driveway as the rumble of heavy machinery grew louder, I understood something with icy clarity. This was not about fees, or maps, or community. This was about power, and they were willing to destroy everything I had built to prove they had it. My mountain sanctuary, my dream home, the life I had worked so hard to create, it was all about to face a storm I could no longer ignore. The roar of engines grew closer with every second, a grinding thunder that rolled through the trees and vibrated in my chest. I stood frozen on the balcony, gripping the cold iron railing, as a convoy of headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness. The air smelled of diesel and damp earth. My cameras, mounted along the driveway, sent flickers of light to the monitors inside, but I didn't need a screen to know what was coming. The Eagle Crest HOA had brought an army, and they were climbing my mountain like conquerors. I dashed inside, snatched my phone, and called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher answered with a calm, rehearsed tone, but her composure cracked when I explained what was happening. "Bulldozers," she repeated, as if she thought she'd misheard. I told her there were at least 6 heavy machines, along with trucks and men with flashlights. "Stay inside," she said sharply. "Deputies are on the way." Outside, the first rumble of engines turned into a chorus of grinding metal as the convoy reached my main gate. My cameras caught the scene in sharp detail. 3 bulldozers in the lead, followed by 2 flatbed trucks loaded with supplies, and a handful of pickup trucks carrying men in reflective vests. I recognized one of the faces immediately, Ross, the HOA president, standing tall in the back of a truck like a general leading his troops. Even through the grainy camera feed, his posture radiated smug authority. He held a rolled-up set of documents in one hand and barked instructions to the drivers. The bulldozers halted at the steel gate that marked the entrance to my property. It was a custom design, reinforced with heavy iron bars and anchored deep into concrete footings. I had installed it more for privacy than defense, never imagining it might have to withstand a siege. Royce stepped forward, flanked by 2 men in hard hats. One of them shouted through a bullhorn, "This is the Eagle Crest Homeowners Association. You are in violation of unpaid community fees and penalties. We are authorized to remove unauthorized structures and collect outstanding debts." The words sounded absurd, like lines from a badly written play. My house was miles outside their jurisdiction. They had no authority, no legal standing. But the sight of those massive machines idling against the darkness made their nonsense feel terrifyingly real. I unlocked my front door and stormed down the driveway, the cold biting my face as I approached the gate. "Turn those machines around," I shouted, my voice cutting through the rumble. "You have no right to be here. This is private property." Royce smiled faintly, the same polite, snake-like grin he had worn in his office months ago. "We've given you every opportunity to comply," he said. "Your refusal leaves us no choice." He held up the rolled documents like a weapon. "We have authority to enforce payment and remove any non-compliant structures." I pressed my hands against the gate, glaring at him through the bars. "That paper is worthless," I snapped. "This land is not part of Eagle Crest. You're trespassing, and you're committing a crime." Royce tilted his head, eyes gleaming in the headlights. "Maps can change," he said smoothly. "Communities evolve. The county will see reason once the dust settles. You'll thank us when this is over." Before I could answer, he raised his arm and gave a sharp signal. The first bulldozer roared forward. Steel jaws bit into the earth beside the gate, clawing at the concrete supports. Sparks shot into the air as metal scraped against metal. My gate shuddered under the assault. "Stop," I yelled, my voice hoarse. "This is illegal. I've called the sheriff." Royce didn't flinch. "Call whoever you like," he said, his tone almost bored. "We're collecting what's owed." The bulldozer's engine roared louder, drowning out my protests. Concrete cracked. The gate groaned and tilted. My heart hammered against my ribs as the structure I had trusted to protect me splintered under their assault. A final metallic shriek split the air, and the gate collapsed inward with a crash that echoed across the valley. I stumbled back, dust stinging my eyes, as the convoy rolled forward onto my property. The bulldozers moved in a slow, deliberate line, their headlights sweeping across the gravel driveway like searchlights. Behind them, the trucks followed, men leaping down with clipboards and cameras, snapping photos of my home like vultures cataloging a kill. I retreated toward the house, my mind racing. The deputies were on their way, but the mountain roads were long and treacherous. It could be 30 minutes or more before help arrived. In that time, these men could do irreversible damage. I needed proof, something undeniable, to show the world what was happening. I grabbed my phone and began recording, narrating every movement, every license plate, every face I could capture. The lead bulldozer reached the edge of my stone driveway and halted. Its operator, a broad-shouldered man in a reflective vest, adjusted his controls. The machine's blade tilted forward, gleaming under the lights. My stomach dropped as the bulldozer lunged, tearing into the decorative retaining wall I had built by hand. Stones tumbled and shattered. The sound of breaking rock echoed like gunfire. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "This is destruction of private property. You'll go to prison for this." Royce ignored me, turning to bark orders at the other operators. "Take down the outer structures first. Start with the retaining walls and driveway. We'll move to the house when the path is clear." His words sliced through me like ice. Move to the house. They were planning to demolish my home, my sanctuary, my life's work, as casually as if it were an abandoned shed. I felt a surge of helpless rage so intense it almost blinded me. For a moment, I considered stepping in front of the machines, daring them to continue. But the rational part of my mind screamed at these men, fueled by arrogance and false authority, might not stop. Instead, I backed toward the house, heart pounding. I could hear the crushing of stone behind me as the bulldozers advanced. Lights from the trucks cast long, shifting shadows across the walls of my mansion, making it look like a fortress under siege. Inside, I locked the doors and rushed to my office, pulling up the live feeds from my security cameras. The monitors flickered with images of chaos, bulldozers ripping into the driveway, men marking my property with spray paint, trucks dumping piles of debris as if preparing for a full-scale demolition. I called the sheriff's department again, shouting into the phone, "They're tearing down my property. Where are the deputies?" The dispatcher assured me officers were en route, but her voice carried a note of unease. "They shouldn't be doing that," she said. "Stay inside. Do not confront them." Outside, the destruction escalated. One bulldozer smashed through the retaining wall with a deafening crash. Another carved a trench across my front yard, uprooting shrubs and tearing deep gouges into the earth. Dust clouds billowed into the cold morning air, mixing with the acrid smell of diesel fuel. My cameras caught close-up shots of the operators' faces, grim, focused, unbothered by the chaos they were creating. I watched in horror as Royce climbed onto the porch, clipboard in hand, and began photographing my front door. He paused to peer through the windows, his expression calm and almost curious, as though he were inspecting a property he already owned. Then he turned to the bulldozer operators and made a circular motion with his hand. The machines responded instantly, pivoting toward the house. "No," I whispered, my throat tightening, "not the house." The first bulldozer approached the stone steps, its blade lowered like a battering ram. The engine roared, drowning out the sound of my pounding heartbeat. I rushed to the balcony, flinging open the door. "Stop," I screamed into the night. "You'll pay for this. Every single one of you will pay." For the first time, Royce looked up at me. His smile was cold, almost triumphant. "Consider this a lesson," he called back. "No one stands apart from the community. Before I could reply, the bulldozer's blade slammed into the base of the steps. The stone cracked with a thunderous boom, sending a tremor through the entire house. Dust exploded upward, coating the porch in a gray haze. Another bulldozer followed, tearing at the corner of the retaining wall. The mansion groaned under the assault. A low, mournful sound that felt like the mountain itself, protesting. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Every crash, every splintering stone, every grinding engine was a knife in my chest. I recorded everything, my hands trembling, knowing this footage might be the only weapon I had against them. Still, I couldn't stop the sense of helplessness that gnawed at me. My dream home, the symbol of everything I had worked for, was being dismantled piece by piece while I stood powerless behind locked doors. Finally, faint but growing louder, the wail of sirens pierced the chaos. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees, casting ghostly colors across the destruction. The bulldozers slowed, their engines idling as sheriff's deputies roared up the driveway. The sudden arrival of law enforcement sent a ripple of unease through the invaders. Workers dropped their tools. Drivers shifted nervously in their seats. Even Royce stiffened, his confident posture faltering for the first time. Deputies leaped from their vehicles, hands on their holsters, shut down the machines. One of them barked. Everyone stepped back. The bulldozers went silent. The sudden quiet almost deafening after hours of mechanical violence. Dust hung in the air, swirling in the flashing lights. My gate lay twisted and broken on the ground. My driveway was scarred and shattered, and my home, though still standing, bore fresh wounds. Stone steps cracked and walls coated in a film of dust and debris. As the deputies spread out to secure the scene, Royce stepped forward, waving his papers like a shield. "We have authority," he declared. "This property is in violation of community bylaws." The lead deputy snatched the documents from his hand. Scanning them quickly, his eyes narrowed. "This isn't worth the paper it's printed on," he said coldly. "You're trespassing and destroying private property. You're all under investigation." For the first time, Royce's smile faltered. He opened his mouth to argue, but the deputy cut him off with a sharp gesture. Not another word. I stood on the balcony, breathless and shaking. As the deputies began questioning the workers and documenting the damage, my mansion was wounded, my land scarred, but I felt a flicker of hope amid the devastation. The HOA had come to break me. Instead, they had exposed themselves, and though the night's destruction would take months to repair, the battle for my mountain had only just begun. The morning after the bulldozers retreated, I walked across my torn driveway and felt the mountain's silence press down on me like a weight. The scent of diesel still lingered in the cold air, mingling with the sharp tang of crushed stone and splintered wood. Where once there had been a smooth gravel path and neatly stacked retaining walls, there was now a landscape of ruin. Chunks of concrete jutted up like broken teeth. My gate lay twisted in a heap of mangled metal, and deep trenches scarred the soil. The house itself, though still standing, bore a jagged crack along one side where the bulldozers had struck. Every step I took kicked up gray dust, a reminder of how easily something beautiful could be violated. I ran my fingers along the cracked stone of the front steps, feeling the grit grind beneath my nails. This had been my sanctuary, my proof that freedom could still exist in a world of endless regulations and petty rules. Now it looked like a battlefield. Anger burned through me, hot and sharp, but beneath it lay something colder and more dangerous: resolve. They had attacked my home with machines and lies. I would fight back with something far stronger: the law. The deputies had stayed late into the night, photographing every broken wall and measuring every gouge in the earth. They collected statements from the bulldozer operators, most of whom suddenly claimed they didn't know the job was illegal. Some said they were hired by Royce personally. Others pointed to vague contracts signed by the HOA board. The deputies warned me not to speak directly to anyone involved and handed me a thick packet of paperwork. "Document everything," one of them advised. "Take photos, record damages, keep every letter they ever sent. This is going to court." I barely slept. At dawn, I brewed a pot of strong coffee and began the grim task of cataloging the destruction. Camera in hand, I photographed every crack, every broken stone, every patch of ripped-up earth. I crawled under the porch to capture images of damaged foundation, beams, and used a measuring tape to log the depth of each bulldozer trench. My security cameras had done their job beautifully, capturing high-definition footage of every machine, every face, every action. I backed up the recordings to multiple hard drives, then uploaded copies to a secure cloud server. If the HOA thought they could erase their crimes with smooth words and forged papers, they were about to learn how wrong they were. By mid-morning, I called my attorney, Richard Garrison. Richard was a quiet man in his early 60s with sharp eyes and a mind like a steel trap. We had met years ago when he helped me secure the mountain property, and he had a reputation for dismantling opponents with surgical precision. I barely finished explaining what had happened before he cut me off. "Do not speak to anyone from the HOA, he said firmly. "Do not agree to any meetings or settlements. Send me every document, every video, every letter. We're going to bury them." Within hours, Richard arrived at the house. He walked the property slowly, his polished shoes crunching over the wreckage, taking notes in a small leather book. He asked precise, pointed questions. When did the first letter arrive? How many calls had I made to the sheriff? Did I have proof of property boundaries? Each time I answered, he nodded without emotion, as though slotting each fact into an invisible framework. When we reached the shattered gate, he crouched low to examine the broken concrete footings. Good, he murmured, almost to himself. Clean cut, shows force. That's criminal damage, not accidental. Inside, Richard spread my documents across the dining room table: deeds, tax receipts, the county survey map stamped with the official seal. He studied each one carefully, then looked up at me with a thin smile. They don't have a case, he said. Not even a sliver. Your property is explicitly outside the Eagle Crest HOA. They fabricated authority they never had. This isn't just trespassing. It's fraud, property destruction, conspiracy, and possibly racketeering if we can prove they pooled HOA funds to pay those contractors. The word racketeering sent a jolt through me. That's serious, I said. It's devastating, Richard replied calmly. And that's exactly what we want. We're going to make an example out of them. His confidence steadied me. For the first time since the attack, I felt a flicker of control returning. Still, a question gnawed at me. Why would they risk this? They had to know it was illegal. Richard leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Power, he said simply. Some HOA boards start believing they're miniature governance. They think if they act boldly enough, no one will challenge them. Royce sounds like the type who thrives on intimidation. He probably assumed you'd fold, pay their so-called fees, or move away. He didn't count on you having the land a very good lawyer on your side. Over the next week, Richard and I worked relentlessly to strengthen our case. He filed an emergency injunction to prevent any further action by the HOA. He also submitted a criminal complaint to the county sheriff and forwarded evidence to the state attorney general's office. Meanwhile, I gathered every scrap of proof I could find. I printed the threatening letters, highlighted the false claims, and organized them into neat binders. I clipped screenshots of text messages from neighbors who had witnessed the bulldozers. I even secured a sworn statement from Deputy Alvarez, the first officer on the scene, describing the illegal destruction he witnessed. The more evidence we collected, the more outrageous the HOA's behavior became. Richard uncovered a series of internal emails obtained through a subpoena that revealed their plan in chilling detail. One message from Royce to the board read, "We can't let this holdout set a precedent. If we move fast, the county will side with us after the fact. Demolition will discourage other troublemakers." Another email showed a transfer of HOA funds to a shell company used to hire the bulldozer contractors. When Richard read the emails aloud in my living room, my hands clenched into fists. "They planned this like a military operation," I said bitterly. "That works in our favor," he replied, tapping the papers. "Every email, every transfer, every lie they've documented their own crimes." While Richard prepared the legal assault, I reached out to the local media. A reporter from the county newspaper drove up to the mountain to interview me. As she filmed the wreckage and listened to my story, her eyes widened in disbelief. "They just showed up with bulldozers?" she asked, her voice shaking with outrage. "Exactly," I said, gesturing to the broken gate behind me. "They thought they could erase my rights with machinery." The story ran the next morning with the headline, "HOA accused of mountain demolition over fake fees." It spread quickly across social media, drawing attention from state news outlets and even a few national reporters. Soon, my phone buzzed constantly with calls from journalists, property rights advocates, and neighbors who had their own horror stories about the Eagle Crest board. The HOA, once smug and untouchable, suddenly found itself under a spotlight it couldn't escape. But not everyone was supportive. One evening, as I reviewed documents in my office, a pickup truck slowed near the edge of my property. Its headlights lingered on the house before speeding off into the night. Another time, I found tire tracks near the lower trail, as if someone had driven up to scout the area. Whether it was Royce's men or angry neighbors, I couldn't be sure. But the message was clear. They wanted me to feel watched. I refused to be intimidated. I reinforced my security system, added motion sensors, and kept a loaded rifle in the safe near my bed. The mountain had taught me self-reliance long before this fight began, and I would not be chased away by cowards hiding behind fake authority. As the legal process gathered momentum, the tide began to turn. The county sheriff's office announced a criminal investigation into the ISOC's actions. State inspectors arrived unannounced at the Eagle Crest office, seizing financial records and computer hard drives. Neighbors who once whispered their complaints began coming forward with statements about years of bullying and extortion by the board. Royce, who had once strutted like a king, now avoided public appearances entirely. Richard kept me updated daily. "The state attorney general is watching this closely," he said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "If we can prove environmental damage from the bulldozing, federal agencies could step in as well." They opened a Pandora's box, and now everyone wants a look inside. Despite the mounting evidence, part of me remained restless. I wanted justice, yes, but I also wanted something more, a guarantee that they could never do this to anyone else. Richard understood. "We're not just going for damages," he said, his eyes glinting. "We're going to dismantle their entire organization. By the time we're finished, Eagle Crest won't exist on a single map. His words lit a fire in me. The HOA had thought they could intimidate me into submission, but they had only awakened a force they couldn't contain. With every passing day, with every document filed and every headline published, I felt the balance shift. They had used bulldozers to destroy my walls, but I was about to use the law to destroy their empire. Still, the fight was far from over. I knew Royce would not surrender easily. Power-hungry men rarely do. Late at night, as I stood on my balcony watching the lights of the valley below, I thought about the first day I bought the mountain. I had chosen this place for its peace, for the promise of solitude and freedom. Now, it had become a battlefield, but it was a battlefield worth defending, and I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks after filing the lawsuits felt like living inside a slow-moving storm. Every day began with a new call from my attorney, Eric, an email filled with fresh discoveries about the Eagle Crest HOA's fraudulent activities. At first, I had believed we were merely preparing a strong civil case for damages, something that would wind its way through the court system over months or years. But the deeper Eric and his team dug, the more shocking the evidence became. What started as a property dispute quickly unraveled into a web of criminal acts: document forgery, illegal construction contracts, embezzlement of community funds, and environmental violations that reached all the way to federal law. The HOA hadn't just overstepped their authority, they had detonated their own destruction, and they didn't even realize it yet. Eric called one cold morning just as the sun was rising over the ridge. I was standing on the slab of concrete that used to be my driveway, watching a crew of engineers take soil samples to measure the damage from the bulldozers. "They're in deeper than we imagined," Eric said without preamble. "We've confirmed that their so-called enforcement order was signed using a forged county seal. That's a felony. And it gets worse. They funded the demolition using money siphoned from a community maintenance fund meant for road repairs. We have enough to trigger both state and federal investigations." His voice held a note of excitement, the kind only lawyers get when the legal ground beneath an opponent's feet begins to crumble. "I hope you're ready for this," he added. "Once we pull this trigger, it's not just a lawsuit, it's going to be an earthquake." I told him to pull it. That very day, Eric filed not only a civil claim for damages, but also a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office. Copies of forged documents were sent to the county fraud division, and environmental regulators were notified about the destruction of protected mineral formations on my land. Within 48 hours, the quiet mountain community of Eagle Crest was buzzing with whispers. Board members who had laughed at my fury only a month before were now receiving subpoenas. Instead of party invitations, the first to crack was a treasurer named Linda Hayes. She had been on the HOA board for years and was known for her obsession with detailed minutes and perfectly balanced budgets. But when investigators questioned her, Linda revealed that Royce, the HOA president, had personally ordered the falsification of documents and bullied the board into approving a special enforcement fund that never appeared in the official financial reports. According to Linda, the bulldozing of my mansion wasn't just a misguided attempt to collect unpaid fees, it was a power play. Royce had convinced the board that if they could force me to pay a massive settlement after demolishing my home, the HOA would gain leverage to expand their district and raise fees on surrounding properties. It was extortion disguised as neighborhood improvement. News traveled fast. Within a week, county inspectors arrived at the Eagle Crest Community Center, armed with search warrants and accompanied by uniformed deputies. Residents watched in stunned silence as file boxes, computers, and even the HOA's main server were carted out under the flashing lights of patrol cars. Royce tried to maintain control, calling an emergency community meeting that night. I attended, standing quietly at the back of the room as dozens of homeowners packed into the hall. Royce strode to the podium, wearing his trademark blazer and confident grin, but I could see the nervous twitch in his jaw. "These allegations are nothing more than a smear campaign," he declared, his voice amplified by the microphone. "Our actions were legal, and we will fight this in court. Don't believe the lies being spread by outsiders trying to destroy what we've built here." His words might have carried weight a month earlier, but now they rang hollow. People shifted uneasily in their seats. Some whispered to each other. A man in the second row raised his hand and asked about the missing road maintenance fund. A woman demanded to know why deputies had seized board emails. Royce dodged each question, repeating empty assurances. I didn't speak until the very end, when the room was buzzing with tension. Stepping forward, I locked eyes with Royce. "This isn't a smear campaign," I said, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is evidence. You forged county seals. You trespassed on protected land. You stole from your own neighbors to finance a crime. And now the state and federal government are investigating every single decision you've made." The room went silent. Royce's face flushed red, and for a moment I thought he might lunge at me. Instead, he slammed the microphone down and stormed out, leaving the meeting in chaos. Homeowners erupted in questions and accusations, many of them directed at the remaining board members, who looked as pale as ghosts. The next few days brought an avalanche of consequences. State investigators froze the HOA's bank accounts to prevent further embezzlement. Contractors who had participated in the demolition were subpoenaed to testify. Emails revealed backroom deals, secret payments, and even plans to annex additional land without homeowner approval. The press caught wind of the story, and soon reporters were driving up the mountain, cameras in tow, eager to film the downfall of what they called the most corrupt HOA in the state. Headlines spread across news outlets: Mountain Mansion demolished in HOA power grab. State launches criminal probe into Eagle Crest HOA. Homeowners turn on rogue board members. As the pressure mounted, board members began turning on each other. Linda Hayes offered full cooperation in exchange for immunity. Another member, a nervous man named Calvin, provided investigators with copies of private text messages in which Royce bragged about teaching that mansion owner a lesson. The messages included instructions to start the bulldozing before dawn so he can't get an injunction in time. Those texts became the smoking gun. Federal agents from the Department of Land Resources arrived next, armed with their own warrants, because my property sat on mineral-rich land with federal environmental protections. The bulldozing had triggered violations of national statutes. Agents in dark jackets swarmed the HOA office and Royce's personal residence, collecting hard drives and hauling away more evidence. Homeowners who once feared the board now stood in their driveways, watching with grim satisfaction as the people who had terrorized them for years were led away in handcuffs for questioning. Despite the chaos, I kept my focus on rebuilding. My engineers finalized blueprints for a new mansion, one stronger and more secure than the first, but I made sure construction wouldn't begin until every legal stone had been turned. Eric advised patience. Let the investigations finish, he said. Every day they dig. Your case for damages grows stronger. Weeks turned into months as hearings began. Royce was indicted on multiple felony charges: fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and illegal destruction of protected property. Several board members faced lesser charges for conspiracy and misuse of funds. The HOA as a legal entity was crippled, its accounts empty, and its charter under review by the state. Homeowners, furious at the betrayal, voted unanimously to dissolve the association entirely. The once proud Eagle Crest district was now a community without governance, its name tainted beyond repair. The day the state officially revoked the HOA's charter was surreal. I received a certified letter from the Attorney General's office stating that Eagle Crest no longer existed as a legal organization. On county maps, the shaded boundary marking the HOA's jurisdiction was removed, replaced with the simple designation unincorporated land. It was as if the HOA had been erased from existence, its power dissolved into nothing more than a cautionary footnote in legal history. That evening, I hiked to the top of a ridge overlooking what used to be the Eagle Crest community. The sun was setting, staining the sky with streaks of red and gold. From up there, the houses below looked small and harmless. Their once intimidating gates, nothing more than specks against the vast mountain. I thought of the board meetings where Royce had plotted his schemes, the smug letters demanding fees I never owed, the roaring bulldozers tearing apart my home. All of it was gone, now bulldozed, not by machines, but by the weight of their own arrogance. Neighbors began to approach me, offering apologies and quiet words of support. Many admitted they had feared retaliation if they opposed the HOA. Some asked if I planned to rebuild. I told them I would, but with stronger walls, higher gates, and airtight legal protections that no group of petty tyrants could ever breach again. Their nods carried a mix of relief and admiration. Later that night, standing on the ruins of my former mansion, I let the cool mountain air wash over me. I had not only survived their assault, I had prevailed. My home would rise again, and the corrupt empire that tried to destroy me had been wiped clean from the map. Justice, I realized, is not always swift, but when it comes, it arrives with the unstoppable force of a mountain storm, sweeping away everything built on lies. The Eagle Crest HOA was gone. My mountain was mine again, and as the stars emerged one by one over the silent peaks, I felt the weight of victory settle into my bones, not loud or triumphant, but steady and unshakable, like the mountain itself. Winter melted slowly across Eagle Crest Mountain, revealing the scars left behind by the bulldozers. For months, my land had stood as a silent battlefield, a raw patch of earth, where my beloved mansion once rose like a castle against the sky. But with spring came renewal. The pine trees whispered with fresh needles, the streams swelled with crystal snowmelt, and the sun warmed the jagged stones that had once been my foundation. It was time to rebuild, not just my home, but the peace that the Eagle Crest HOA had tried so ruthlessly to steal from me. Reconstruction began with careful planning. I hired a team of engineers and architects who specialized in mountain estates, ensuring that every blueprint was stronger, every wall more resilient than before. My new home would not only replace what was lost, it would surpass it. I wanted the structure to reflect what I had endured: unshakable, elegant, and untouchable. Granite quarried from the very mountainside formed the base. Reinforced steel beams created a skeleton of unyielding strength, and triple-paned windows would withstand the fiercest blizzards. This was no longer just a mansion. It was a statement to anyone who dared challenge my right to live free on my own land. Each day, I watched the crew work with relentless precision. Bulldozers returned to my mountain, but this time they were allies, not invaders. The rumble of vengeance no longer filled me with rage. Instead, it sounded like justice taking physical form, machines carving out the future I had fought to reclaim. Neighbors who once feared the HOA now drove up the mountain to see the progress, bringing coffee, sandwiches, and quiet words of support. Some stood beside me, eyes wide with admiration at the scale of the project. "This place will be legendary," one said softly. "It's like the mountain itself chose you." But rebuilding wasn't just about stone and steel. It was about closure. The legal battles, though nearly over, still demanded my attention. Royce, the former HOA president, sat in a county jail awaiting trial on multiple felony charges. The state had frozen his assets, and prosecutors were confident he would face years in prison. Other board members accepted plea deals, agreeing to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. The HOA itself no longer existed. Its name had been stricken from every official record, its boundaries erased from every map. The district they once ruled had dissolved into simple, unincorporated land, a community free from their grasp. One afternoon, as construction crews hoisted the first steel beams of my new mansion, Eric arrived with a thick folder in hand. "It's official," he said, handing me the papers. "The federal court awarded you full restitution for the destruction of your property. Every board member is personally liable for damages. Royce will lose everything he owns. They tried to bankrupt you, and now their greed has bankrupted them." I flipped through the documents, scanning the signatures and legal seals. It was more than money. It was vindication. The very people who believed they could intimidate me into submission were now financially ruined, their reputations shredded. Their once feared HOA had become a cautionary tale across the state, a warning to every petty tyrant who thought they could bend the law to their will. Still, victory carried a strange quiet. There was no parade, no crowd cheering my name. Instead, there was only the sound of wind through the pines and the steady hum of construction equipment. Justice, I realized, is not a loud explosion. It is a deep, steady force, like the slow grinding of stone against stone, reshaping the world in silence until the guilty have nowhere left to stand. As the months passed, the mansion began to take shape. A sweeping balcony stretched across the western side, offering a panoramic view of the valley below. Inside, vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows invited the wilderness indoors, blurring the line between house and mountain. One added a private library, a grand fireplace carved from the very granite of Eagle Crest, and a rooftop observatory where I could watch the stars without interference. Every detail was deliberate, every stone a reminder that I had not been broken. Neighbors who had once stayed silent began to reclaim their own voices. Without the HOA's oppressive rule, the community blossomed with independence. Fences came down. Children played freely in yards, once restricted by pointless regulations. Homeowners who had paid endless fees to fund Royce's schemes were now pooling resources to improve roads and maintain trails voluntarily, fairly, and without coercion. What had once been a dictatorship disguised as a neighborhood was now a cooperative, self-reliant group of mountain families. Many credited my fight for inspiring them to stand up for their own rights. I told them the truth. I hadn't fought for inspiration. I fought because no one should be allowed to take what doesn't belong to them. On the day construction finished, I stood on the new balcony and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. The sky burned with streaks of crimson and gold, reflecting off the polished stone of the mansion's facade. Workers packed up their tools, neighbors waved from the winding road below, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine and victory. My heart swelled with something I hadn't felt since before the bulldozers came. Peace, not the fragile peace of ignorance, but the solid peace earned through struggle. Later that night, Eric joined me for a quiet toast. We clinked glasses of aged whiskey as stars bloomed above the peaks. "You know," he said, gazing at the vast dark sky, "this whole thing will be studied in law schools someday. A single homeowner dismantling an entire HOA, exposing fraud, and triggering federal action, it's unprecedented." I smiled, feeling the weight of his words. "They thought I was just a man on a mountain," I said. "They forgot that a man on a mountain sees everything coming." Silence settled between us, comfortable and profound. Below, the once feared HOA district was nothing but a collection of quiet homes scattered across unincorporated land. No board meetings, no fraudulent letters, no threat, only freedom. As I looked out over the landscape, I realized that my victory was not just personal. It was a message to anyone who has ever been bullied by power-hungry neighbors or corrupt organizations. Stand your ground. The law belongs to those who have the courage to use it. No amount of fake authority can destroy the truth. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, reflecting off the new glass windows of my mansion. I had lost everything once, but in the end, I gained something greater, proof that justice, though slow, is unstoppable. The Eagle Crest HOA was gone, wiped clean from the state map as if it had never existed. My home was reborn, stronger than before, and the mountain, eternal and unyielding, stood as a silent witness to every battle fought and won. This chapter of my life closed, not with the crash of bulldozers, but with the quiet strength of a man who refused to be broken. My mountain was free, my home was safe, and my story, carved into the rock of Eagle Crest, would echo for generations. If you enjoyed this incredible true story of justice and revenge, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Bright Reality on YouTube for more powerful real-life stories that will leave you speechless.